The antiseptic smell of St. Mary's Hospital had become as familiar to me as my own cologne over the past 3 months. I'd been coming here twice a week for chemotherapy treatments, fighting a battle that felt more lonely than any war should ever be. My wife Lisa had passed away 2 years ago from the same cancer that now coursed through my veins, and her family had made it crystal clear that they blamed me for not catching her symptoms sooner. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair of the oncology waiting room, watching the morning sun filter through the large windows that overlooked downtown Portland, Oregon. The city was just waking up, coffee shops opening their doors, people hurrying to work with steam rising from their cups in the crisp October air. I envied their normalcy, their ability to worry about traffic jams and quarterly reports instead of blood counts and survival rates. Michael Thompson. The nurse called out, her voice cutting through my thoughts. I recognized her immediately. Nancy had been my saving grace during this whole ordeal, always ready with a warm smile and encouragement when the treatments left me feeling like a ghost of myself. "Good morning, Nancy," I said, forcing a smile as I followed her down the familiar hallway lined with motivational posters and artwork clearly made by children. The walls here tried so hard to be cheerful, but everyone knew what this place really was. A battleground where people fought for their lives every single day. "How are you feeling today, honey?" Nancy asked, checking her clipboard as we walked. "Dr. Martinez wants to see you before your treatment. He has some news about your latest test results." My stomach dropped. In cancer speak, news was rarely good news. I'd learned it the hard way when they first told Lisa her cancer had metastasized. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. The examination room felt smaller than usual. Dr. Martinez entered with his typical professional demeanor, but there was something different in his eyes today, something that looked almost like relief. "Michael, I have to admit, I'm quite surprised by your latest results," he began, settling into his chair across from me. "Your tumor markers have dropped significantly. The new treatment protocol we started 6 weeks ago appears to be working better than we anticipated." I felt my breath catch in my throat. "What exactly does that mean, Doc?" "It means you're responding exceptionally well to the treatment. So well, in fact, that we're going to move forward with the surgery we discussed. If everything goes according to plan, we should be able to remove the remaining tumor completely." Dr. Martinez leaned forward, his expression serious but hopeful. "Michael, I think we're looking at a real chance for remission here." The word remission hung in the air like a prayer answered. I'd been preparing myself for the worst outcome for months, making peace with the possibility that I might follow Lisa sooner than I'd hoped. This news felt surreal, like someone else's good fortune accidentally delivered to me. When would the surgery happen? I managed to ask. "Next week. We'll need to do some additional scans first, but I'm optimistic. You'll need someone to stay with you during recovery, though. Family support is crucial during this time." Family support. That was where things got complicated. Lisa's parents, Robert and Patricia, had never warmed up to me, even during our 10-year marriage. They'd tolerated me for Lisa's sake, but after her death, their barely concealed resentment had bloomed into outright hostility. Lisa's brother James and his wife, Carol, weren't much better. They seemed to view me as an unwelcome reminder of their loss, as if my continued existence somehow diminished Lisa's memory. "I'll figure something out," I told Dr. Martinez, though I honestly had no idea what that would look like. My own parents lived in Florida, and at their age, asking them to fly across the country to care for me felt selfish. I had friends, sure, but none close enough to impose on for weeks of recovery time. After scheduling the pre-surgical appointments, I found myself in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The lunch rush was beginning, with doctors, nurses, and visitors filing in for quick meals between crises and miracles. I watched a young couple at a nearby table, the woman clearly pregnant, both of them glowing with the kind of happiness I remembered feeling once upon a time. My phone buzzed with a text message from James. "Dad wants to know if you're planning to sell the house soon. Carol found a place she thinks would be good for you. Smaller, more appropriate, as if my grief had an expiration date, as if there was a proper timeline for moving on from the life Lisa and I had built together. The house had been ours, filled with memories of lazy Sunday mornings in bed, dinner parties with friends, quiet evenings reading together on the couch. It was the last place Lisa had been truly happy before the diagnosis changed everything. I deleted the message without responding. The afternoon treatment went smoothly, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down a future I couldn't quite make out. The chemotherapy drip made me drowsy, and I found myself drifting in and out of sleep, dreaming of Lisa's laugh and the way she used to steal bites of my dessert when she thought I wasn't looking. When I finally made it home to our quiet neighborhood in southeast Portland, the autumn light was fading into that golden hour that photographers love. Our house, a modest craftsman-style home with a front porch that Lisa had insisted on painting sky blue, looked exactly the same as always. But somehow, after the day's news, it felt different. Like maybe, just maybe, it might remain my home for longer than I dare to hope. I sat on the porch steps, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes in the fading light, their laughter carrying on the crisp evening air. Tomorrow I would call Robert and Patricia to tell them about the surgery. I would ask for their support, knowing full well they might refuse. But tonight, for the first time in months, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I might see another spring, another summer, another chance at finding some version of happiness again. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lisa had always been the optimist in our relationship, the one who believed everything would work out in the end. Now, facing the same disease that took her, I was finally learning to hold on to hope the way she always had. It felt like the most beautiful and heartbreaking gift she could have left me. The pre-surgical consultation arrived faster than I'd expected. 3 days had passed since my conversation with Dr. Martinez, and I still hadn't called Lisa's family. Instead, I'd spent those days putting my affairs in order, updating my will, organizing important documents, doing all the practical things that felt easier than facing the emotional minefield of asking for help from people who clearly wished I would disappear from their lives. St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with its usual controlled chaos as I made my way to the surgical wing for my appointment. The morning rain had turned Portland streets into mirrors, reflecting the gray October sky and making everything feel subdued and contemplative. I'd always loved the rain, how it made the city feel more intimate. But today it just reminded me of every funeral I'd ever attended. Mr. Thompson? A new voice called my name. Dr. Sarah Kim, the surgical oncologist, was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with confident eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her handshake was firm, professional, reassuring in a way that made you believe she performed this exact surgery hundreds of times before. "I've been reviewing your case with Dr. Martinez," she said as we settled into her office, which was notably warmer than most medical spaces, with actual artwork on the walls and a small plant thriving on the windowsill. "Your response to the treatment has been remarkable. Honestly, it's cases like yours that remind me why I became a surgeon." She pulled up my scans on her computer, pointing to areas that meant everything and nothing to me simultaneously. "See this here? 6 months ago, this mass was nearly twice the size. The treatment has shrunk it down to something we can definitely work with. I'm confident we can get clear margins. Clear margins. Clean removal. Medical terminology that translated to hope, to possibility, to life extending beyond the arbitrary deadlines cancer tried to impose. The surgery itself will take about 4 hours. You'll be under general anesthesia. Of course. Recovery will be the challenging part. You'll need someone with you for at least the first week, preferably 2. Someone who can help with basic tasks, drive you to follow-up appointments, that sort of thing." There was again the assumption of family support that felt increasingly fictional with each mention. I found myself nodding along, as if I had a house full of loving relatives just waiting to rush to my aid. "Dr. Kim, I need to be honest about something," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "My support system is limited. My wife passed away 2 years ago from the same cancer I'm fighting now. Her family and I don't have the best relationship. I'm not sure they'll be willing to help." Dr. Kim's expression softened, and I saw recognition in her eyes. She'd probably seen this before, patients facing medical crises with complicated or absent family dynamics. "Michael, Can I ask you something personal? Do you have anyone in your life? Friends, co-workers, neighbors? Anyone who cares about you? I thought about it honestly. There was Tom from work, my supervisor at the accounting firm where I'd been employed for 12 years. We grabbed lunch occasionally, talked about sports and politics, and the general frustrations of middle age. There was Mrs. Chun, my elderly neighbor who'd been bringing me casseroles ever since Lisa died, never saying much but always checking to make sure I was eating properly. There was a guy at the coffee shop who knew my order by heart and always asked about my day. But asking any of them to essentially become my caregiver for weeks felt impossible. These were surface relationships, pleasant but not deep enough to bear the weight of real need. I'll figure something out, I told Dr. Kim, the same lie I'd been telling myself and everyone else. She studied me for a long moment. Michael, I'm going to be direct with you. This surgery represents your best chance at beating this thing. But recovery matters just as much as the procedure itself. If you don't have proper support, if you're struggling alone, it could impact your healing. I've seen too many patients sabotage their own recovery because they were too proud or too isolated to ask for help. Her words stung because they were true. I was proud and I was isolated, and I was terrible at asking for help even under the best circumstances. Lisa used to tease me about it. How I'd rather spend hours trying to fix something myself than call a repairman. That evening, I finally picked up the phone to call Robert and Patricia. Their house was in Lake Oswego, one of Portland's more affluent suburbs, the kind of place where every lawn looked like it belonged in a magazine and every car in the driveway cost more than most people made in a year. Lisa had grown up there, in a world of privilege that I'd never quite felt comfortable inhabiting, even after 10 years of marriage. Robert answered on the third ring. Michael. His voice was neutral, polite in a way that felt more cutting than outright hostility. Hi, Robert. I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to talk to you and Patricia about something important. Hold on. I'll put you on speaker so Patricia can hear. I heard muffled conversation in the background, then Patricia's voice joining the call. Michael, what is it? I took a deep breath and explained the situation, the successful treatment, the upcoming surgery, the need for support during recovery. I tried to keep my voice steady, factual, not too emotional or pleading. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, Robert spoke. Well, that's good news about the treatment working. Lisa would be happy to know you're fighting this thing. Yes, Patricia added, though her tone remained cool. We're glad you're doing well. Another pause. I waited for the offer of help, the acknowledgement of what I was really asking for. Michael, Robert continued, you know Patricia and I aren't as young as we used to be. We're both dealing with our own health issues. Patricia's arthritis has been acting up, and my back isn't what it used to be. I'm not sure we'd be much help during your recovery. I understand, I said, though the rejection still felt like a physical blow. I just thought I should let you know what was happening. Of course. Keep us updated on how the surgery goes. And Michael, you should really think about what we discussed before, about the house. A smaller place might be easier to manage, especially while you're recovering. They wanted me gone, not just from their lives, but from the physical spaces that connected me to Lisa, the house we'd chosen together, the neighborhood where we planned to grow old, the life we built that they seemed to view as somehow illegitimate without her in it. After hanging up, I sat in Lisa's favorite chair, a worn leather recliner that faced a window overlooking our back garden. She used to sit there in the mornings with her coffee, watching the birds at the feeder we'd installed together. The chair still smelled faintly of her perfume, though I knew that was probably just my imagination, my heart-stubborn refusal to let go completely. Tomorrow I would call Tom at work. I would swallow my pride and ask if he knew anyone who might be willing to help, or if his wife might have suggestions. I would call Mrs. Chan and see if she had family who provided care services. I would figure this out because the alternative was letting cancer win, and I owed it to Lisa's memory to fight this thing with everything I had. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of how alone I really was. How Lisa's death had left me not just without my partner, but somehow outside the circle of family and belonging I'd thought was mine. Tonight, I grieved not just for her, but for the version of myself that had believed love was enough to make you truly belong somewhere. Surgery day arrived with a kind of crisp, clear morning that made Portland look like a postcard. I'd been awake since 4 a.m., not because I needed to be at the hospital early, but because anxiety had made sleep impossible. My pre-op appointment was at 8 a.m., surgery scheduled for 10, and I'd be spending the night in the hospital for observation. I'd finally found a solution to my post-surgery care problem, though it wasn't what anyone would call ideal. Tom from work had connected me with his neighbor's adult daughter, Jennifer, who worked as a freelance caregiver between nursing assignments. She could stay with me for the first week, help with basic needs, drive me to appointments. It felt strange, hiring someone to care about my well-being, but it was better than facing recovery alone. The morning routine felt surreal in its ordinariness. Shower with the special antibacterial soap they'd given me. No breakfast as instructed. Double-check that all my important documents were organized and accessible. Water the plants that Lisa had loved, and I'd somehow managed to keep alive. Lock the door behind me, wondering if I'd return to the same life or something entirely different. St. Mary's Hospital looked different at 7:30 in the morning. Quieter, more purposeful. The usual chaos of visiting hours and routine appointments hadn't begun yet. Just essential personnel and patients facing their own major moments. I found myself walking slower than necessary, as if I could delay the inevitable by taking my time. Nancy was working the pre-op desk, and her familiar smile felt like the first good omen of the day. "There's our fighter," she said, pulling up my information on her computer. "How are you feeling this morning, sweetheart?" "Nervous," I admitted, "but ready, I think. Dr. Kim is one of the best surgeons we have here. You're in excellent hands." Nancy handed me the standard paperwork and hospital bracelet. "Is your family coming to wait during the surgery?" I hesitated. "Actually, no. It's just me today." Nancy's expression shifted slightly, a brief shadow of concern crossing her face. "Michael, honey, you know you don't have to go through this alone, right? We have volunteer coordinators who can sit with people during surgeries. Sometimes it helps to know someone's thinking about you." The kindness in her voice nearly broke me. "That would be nice, actually. Thank you. I'll arrange that. Now, let's get you ready." The pre-op area was a series of curtained spaces, each containing a narrow bed and medical equipment that looked both intimidating and reassuring. I changed into the hospital gown that somehow managed to make everyone look vulnerable and childlike, then waited for the parade of medical professionals who needed to check various boxes before I could be wheeled into surgery. Dr. Kim arrived first, radiating the kind of calm confidence that made you believe everything would work out exactly as planned. "How are we feeling this morning, Michael?" "Ready to get this thing out of me," I said, managing a smile. "That's the spirit I like to hear." "The anesthesiologist will be by in a few minutes to discuss the procedure, and then we'll get you into the OR. Any last-minute questions?" "Will you be able to tell immediately if you got everything?" "We'll do frozen sections during the surgery to check the margins in real time. If everything looks good, I'll be able to give you encouraging news when you wake up, but the final pathology results will take a few days." After Dr. Kim left, I found myself alone with my thoughts and the low hum of medical equipment. Through the thin curtain, I could hear other patients having similar conversations with their surgical teams, the universal language of hope and fear that filled pre-op areas everywhere. "Mr. Thompson?" A woman's voice interrupted my thoughts. "I'm Maria Santos, one of the volunteer coordinators Nancy mentioned. I'll be here during your surgery, and I'll make sure you have someone to talk to when you wake up." Maria was probably in her 60s, with kind eyes and the sort of presence that suggested she'd sat with countless worried families and anxious patients. She pulled up a chair next to my bed. "Tell me a little bit about yourself, Michael. What do you do when you're not fighting cancer?" I found myself talking about work, about the house Lisa and I had restored together, about the garden we'd planted, and the dreams we'd shared before everything changed. Maria listened with the kind of attention that made you feel like your story mattered, like your life had weight and meaning beyond medical charts and treatment protocols. "Your wife sounds like she was a remarkable woman," Maria said softly. She would have been better at this whole thing than me. She was good at letting people help her, good at asking for what she needed. I'm still learning. Grief changes us in unexpected ways, Maria observed. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us who we really are when everything familiar falls away. The anesthesiologist appeared with his own set of questions and explanations, followed by surgical nurses confirming my identity and procedure details for what felt like the 100th time. The whole process was designed to prevent errors, but also served to build anticipation to an almost unbearable level. Finally, it was time. The gurney ride to the operating room felt like being transported to another world, the ceiling tiles flashing by overhead, while conversations and sound became increasingly distant. Dr. Kim appeared above me one last time, smiling behind her surgical mask. "See you on the other side, Michael. We're going to take good care of you." The anesthesia mask covered my face, and someone told me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7 before everything faded to black. I woke up gradually, consciousness returning in layers like morning fog, lifting from a harbor. First, awareness of being somewhere different, then recognition of the recovery room, with its distinctive sounds and smells. Finally, the realization that I felt different, lighter somehow, as if something that had been weighing me down was simply gone. "Michael, can you hear me?" Nancy's voice, warm and familiar. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw from the breathing tube. Nancy helped me sip some ice water, the coolness shocking my system back toward full awareness. "The surgery went perfectly," she said, and I could hear the genuine joy in her voice. "Dr. Kim got everything. Clean margins, no complications. You did great." Relief flooded through me so completely that I started crying, not from sadness, but from a kind of overwhelmed gratitude that I couldn't contain. Nancy squeezed my hand and didn't say anything about the tears. "Is Maria still here?" I managed to ask. "She's right outside. She's been checking on you every hour since they brought you back from surgery. You've got people who care about you, Michael, more than you realize." As the anesthesia continued to wear off, I found myself thinking about Dr. Kim's words. Clean margins, no complications. For the first time in 2 years, the future felt like something I could actually plan for instead of just endure. But more than that, I was thinking about Nancy's kindness, about Maria spending her day with a stranger because she believed no one should face surgery alone, about the way people I barely knew had shown up in ways that Lisa's own family hadn't. Maybe belonging wasn't about blood or marriage certificates. Maybe it was about the small acts of care that happened when people chose to see your humanity and respond to it. Maybe I'd been looking for family in all the wrong places, while the real thing was quietly forming around me in ways I hadn't recognized. Tomorrow I would go home to begin recovery, with Jennifer there to help me navigate the practical challenges ahead. But tonight, in this hospital bed, surrounded by the gentle sounds of people dedicated to healing, I felt less alone than I had in months. 2 weeks post-surgery, I was finally strong enough to handle the discharge paperwork myself. The pathology results had come back clean, confirming what Dr. Kim had suspected during the operation. No remaining cancer cells, clear margins, excellent prognosis for long-term survival. The words felt surreal, like they belonged to someone else's story. Jennifer had been a godsend during the first week of recovery, helping me navigate the basic tasks that suddenly felt monumental when you were healing from major surgery. She left the previous Friday, confident that I could manage on my own, though she'd made me promise to call if I needed anything. The discharge process at St. Mary's felt different this time. Instead of being a patient fighting for my life, I was someone who had won, someone who got to return to the world of the living with a real future ahead of me. Nancy was working the discharge desk, and her face lit up when she saw me approaching. "Look at you," she said, beaming. "You look like yourself again." It was true. The grayish pallor that had haunted my complexion during months of chemotherapy was gone, replaced by something that actually resembled healthy skin. I'd even gained back some of the weight I'd lost, thanks to Jennifer's insistence on proper meals and Jennifer's surprisingly excellent cooking. "I feel like myself again," I said, settling into the chair across from Nancy's desk. "More than I have in 2 years, honestly." As Nancy processed my discharge paperwork, I found myself looking around the hospital lobby with new eyes. This place had been the center of my world for months, the arena where I'd fought the biggest battle of my life. Now it would fade back to being just a building I occasionally drove past, a chapter in my story rather than the entire book. Michael Thompson? I turned to see Robert and Patricia walking toward us, dressed in the kind of expensive casual wear that Scream Lake Oswego weekend. James and Carol were with them, completing the family delegation that I hadn't expected and definitely hadn't invited. Robert, Patricia, I said, standing to greet them. I didn't know you were coming. We thought we should be here for your discharge, Patricia said, her voice carrying the same cool politeness I'd grown accustomed to over the years. It seemed like the right thing to do. Nancy looked up from her paperwork, clearly sensing the tension in the air. Are these your family members, Michael? I can include them in the discharge instructions if you'd like. Yes, I said carefully. This is Lisa's family. My in-laws. What happened next unfolded like a scene from a movie I didn't want to be in. Robert stepped forward, his expression shifting from polite concern to something much cooler. Actually, we wanted to talk to Michael about some practical matters, he said to Nancy, as if I wasn't standing right there. Now that he's recovered, there are some decisions that need to be made about the future. Carol nodded in agreement. We've been very patient, but it's time to move forward. For everyone's sake. I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach, the same sensation I'd experienced during every uncomfortable family gathering over the past 2 years. But something was different now. Maybe it was beating cancer, or maybe it was finally understanding what real kindness looked like after experiencing it from strangers, but I found myself less willing to absorb their subtle hostility in silence. What kind of decisions? I asked directly. James stepped forward, clearly nominated as the family spokesman for whatever they planned to say. Michael, we think it's time you considered selling the house. Lisa's been gone for 2 years now, and you're starting fresh with your health. It might be good for you to start fresh in other ways, too. A clean break, Patricia added, her voice taking on a tone that suggested she was being generous by even having this conversation. There are some lovely condos closer downtown. Smaller, easier to maintain. More appropriate for someone in your situation. Your situation. Single, alone, no longer connected to their daughter, and therefore no longer their concern. Michael has been through major surgery, Nancy interrupted, her professional composure barely concealing her disapproval. This might not be the best time for major life decisions. Oh, we're not pressuring him, Carol said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're just being practical. Michael doesn't really need that big house anymore, and honestly, it's probably hard for him to be surrounded by memories. The irony was staggering. They were talking about Lisa's memory, as if it was something painful I needed to escape from, when her memory was the thing that kept me fighting during the darkest moments of treatment. They wanted me to abandon the life we'd built together, as if my survival was somehow a betrayal of her death. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. I love that house. Lisa and I chose it together, and I have no intention of selling it. The silence that followed felt charged with years of unspoken resentment, finally rising to the surface. Robert's expression hardened. Michael, be reasonable. What do you need with 4 bedrooms and a big yard? You're not getting any younger, and managing a house that size alone is going to become increasingly difficult. Plus, James added, the neighborhood is changing. Property values are good right now, but who knows how long that will last. It makes financial sense to sell while the market is strong. They were tag-teaming me, presenting their argument from every angle except the honest one. They wanted me gone, out of the house where Lisa had lived, out of the neighborhood where they might run into me, out of their lives entirely, so they could grieve their daughter without the inconvenient reminder of the husband who had survived when she hadn't. I appreciate your concern, I said, choosing my words carefully, but I'm not selling the house. It's my home. Patricia's composure finally cracked. Your home? Michael, that was Lisa's childhood neighborhood. Her friends still live there. Her memories are there. Don't you think it's a little selfish to cling to a life that was never really yours to begin with? Never really mine to begin with. The words hit like a physical blow, revealing the truth they'd been dancing around for 2 years. In their eyes, I'd been borrowing Lisa's life, temporarily granted access to their family and their world through marriage. Now that she was gone, that access was revoked. Nancy had stopped processing paperwork entirely. Watching this family drama unfold with a kind of horrified fascination reserved for car accidents and reality television. "Mrs. Patterson," she said to Patricia, her voice carefully professional, "perhaps this conversation would be better continued in private, after Michael has had time to fully recover." "Oh, we're not trying to upset him," Carol said sweetly. "We're just being honest about the situation. Michael knows we've never been close. It's nothing personal. It's just that, without Lisa connecting us, we don't really have much of a relationship. And that's okay. People move on. That's how life works." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. They were right, of course. We'd never been close, never had much of a relationship beyond our shared love for Lisa. But hearing them acknowledge it so bluntly, in a hospital lobby where I'd just been celebrating survival, felt like being punched while I was still recovering from surgery. "You're absolutely right," I said quietly. "We don't have much of a relationship." I saw satisfaction flicker across their faces, as if they'd finally got me to admit what they'd always known. "But," I continued, my voice getting stronger, "Lisa was my wife for 10 years. I loved her completely, and she loved me the same way. That house isn't just a childhood neighborhood. It's where we built our adult life together, where we planned our future, where we were happy, where we took care of each other through sickness and health until death did us part. You can dismiss that if you want to, but you can't erase it." Robert's face was reddening, a sign I remember from family dinners when political discussions got heated. "Michael, no one is trying to erase anything. But Lisa is gone and you're alive, and life goes on. We're trying to help you move forward. By telling me I don't belong in my own house, by suggesting that my marriage was somehow temporary or conditional," I shook my head. "That's not help, Robert. That's just you wanting me to disappear, so you don't have to deal with the complicated feelings of grief." "How dare you?" Patricia said, her voice rising enough that other people in the lobby were starting to notice our conversation. "We lost our daughter, our only daughter. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" "I lost my wife," I said simply. "The woman I planned to spend the rest of my life with. The person who knew me better than anyone else ever has or ever will. So yes, I have some idea what loss feels like." James stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of a conversation that was spiraling away from them. "Look, Michael, we're all grieving here. Maybe we can table this discussion for now and revisit it when emotions aren't running so high." "No," I said, surprised at myself with the firmness in my voice. "I think we need to finish this conversation right now, because I'm tired of pretending we're all going to suddenly become close. You want me to sell the house and move on with my life? Fine, but be honest about why. You want me gone because I remind you of Lisa, and grieving her is easier when you don't have to acknowledge that she chose me, that she built a life with me, that she was happy with me right up until she got sick." Carol gasped as if I'd said something shocking, but Patricia just stared at me with undisguised hostility. "You know what, Michael? You're right. You do remind us of Lisa, and not in a good way. You remind us of how she wasted years of her life with someone who wasn't good enough for her, someone who couldn't even recognize the symptoms of cancer in his own wife. There it was, the accusation that had been lurking beneath every interaction for 2 years, finally dragged into the light. "You think I killed her," I said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. "I think you failed her when she needed you most," Patricia replied coldly. "I think a better husband would have insisted she see a doctor sooner, would have pushed harder when she said she was just tired all the time." The lobby around us had gone quiet, other families and patients trying to pretend they weren't witnessing this family implosion. Nancy looked like she wanted to intervene, but didn't know how. "You might be right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I replay every day of Lisa's illness, wondering what I could have done differently. I blame myself for not pushing harder, not seeing the signs sooner, not somehow knowing that her fatigue wasn't just stress from work. That guilt is something I'll carry for the rest of my life." I paused, looking at each of their faces, seeing the satisfaction they took in my admission of culpability. But here's what I know for certain. Lisa loved me. She told me every day, right up until the end, She never blamed me for her diagnosis or her death. She made me promise to keep living, to find happiness again, to not let grief destroy the life she couldn't finish living herself. So I'm going to honor that promise, and I'm going to do it in the house we chose together, surrounded by the memories we made together. Robert shook his head, his expression a mixture of disgust and dismissal. You're delusional if you think Lisa would want you clinging to the past like this. She will want you to move on, start fresh, stop wallowing in what used to be. Maybe, I acknowledged, but that's between me and her memory, not between me and you. The finality in my voice seemed to register with all of them simultaneously. This wasn't negotiation or a discussion. This was me drawing a line and daring them to cross it. Patricia looked at Robert, then at James and Carol. Some kind of silent family communication passing between them. Fine, she said finally, if that's how you want it. But don't expect us to be part of whatever life you're building for yourself. Don't expect Christmas cards or birthday calls or any pretense that we're family, because we're not. We never really were. I know, I said sadly, but I kept hoping that our shared love for Lisa might be enough to build something on. I kept hoping that grief might bring us together instead of driving us apart. Well, you hope wrong, Carol said with sharpness that surprised me coming from her usually passive demeanor. Lisa's gone, and so is whatever obligation we had to maintain a relationship with you. They turned to leave, presenting a united front of rejection that should have devastated me. Instead, I found myself feeling something unexpected. Relief. The pretense was finally over. The uncomfortable family gatherings, the stilted phone calls, the careful navigation of conversations that avoided any real emotion or honesty. But as they reached the lobby doors, Patricia turned back one final time, her voice carrying across the space with deliberate cruelty. You won't be missed, Michael, by any of us. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, designed to wound and diminish. I watched them walk to the automatic doors and disappear into Portland afternoon, taking with them the last pretense of family connection I'd been desperately clinging to. Nancy had been silent through most of this exchange, but now she reached across her desk and touched my arm gently. Michael, honey, I'm so sorry you had to go through that, especially today when you should be celebrating. I turned back to her, suddenly remembering where I was and why I was here. Discharge day. The end of my cancer treatment, the beginning of remission, and whatever life looked like now. It's okay, I said, and realized I actually meant it. Actually, I think it needed to happen. We've all been pretending for 2 years that we were going to find a way to be family, without Lisa. Today, we finally admitted that was never going to work. Nancy finished processing my paperwork in silence, occasionally glancing up at me with concern. But I wasn't falling apart the way I might have expected. Instead, I felt oddly centered, as if Patricia's final cruel words had somehow freed me from an obligation I'd been carrying without realizing how heavy it had become. Mr. Thompson? A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Dr. Martinez was walking toward us, his usual professional demeanor replaced by something warmer, more personal. Dr. Martinez, good to see you. I was hoping I'd catch you before you left. I wanted to thank you personally. I looked at him, confused. Thank me for what? For the donation you made to our cancer center. Nancy told me about it, and I have to say, it's one of the most generous gifts we've received this year. The new imaging equipment you funded is going to help us catch cancers earlier in other patients, potentially save lives that we might have lost before. I stared at him, then at Nancy, completely bewildered. I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake. I didn't make any donation. Nancy pulled up something on her computer, frowning. It's right here in your file, Michael. A substantial donation to the St. Mary's Cancer Center, made in memory of Lisa Thompson. The paperwork shows it was processed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, right around the time of my surgery, when I was unconscious and then heavily medicated during recovery. Someone had made a significant donation in Lisa's name, using my information. How substantial are we talking about? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I knew the answer. Dr. Martinez consulted his notes. $250,000. It's funding a new MRI machine specifically designed for early cancer detection. We're calling it the Lisa Thompson Memorial Imaging Suite. The exact amount I received from Lisa's life insurance policy. Money I'd been holding in a separate account because spending it felt like profiting from her death, but keeping it felt like ignoring her final gift to me. Dr. Martinez, I need to see that paperwork, I said, my voice tight with suspicion. Nancy printed out the donation documentation, and there it was. My signature, forged but convincingly done, authorizing the transfer of funds from my account to the hospital. The donation had been made in loving memory of Lisa Thompson, beloved daughter and wife. Son of a bitch, I whispered, understanding flooding through me like ice water. Robert had power of attorney over Lisa's medical decisions during her final hospitalization. He'd had access to my financial information during the probate process. And he clearly decided that if I wasn't going to use Lisa's insurance money the way he thought I should, he'd make that decision for me. Is there a problem, Michael? Dr. Martinez asked, clearly picking up on my agitation. Someone forged my signature on this donation. Someone in my late wife's family, I'm guessing, who thought they knew better than I did how to honor her memory. The implications were staggering. Not only had they stolen $250,000 from me, they'd done it in a way that made me look generous and selfless to the hospital staff. They created a narrative where I was the grieving widower making a noble gesture in my wife's memory, while simultaneously ensuring I couldn't undo their decision without looking like a monster who wanted to take money away from cancer patients. Nancy's face had gone pale. Michael, this is fraud. You need to call the police. And say what? That I want to take back money that's already been used to buy medical equipment that will save lives? That I want to destroy a memorial to my dead wife because my in-laws stole from me? I laughed bitterly. They've played this perfectly. I can't pursue charges without looking like the worst person in the world. Dr. Martinez was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Mr. Thompson, if this donation was made without your consent, we need to address the situation immediately. The hospital can't accept fraudulent donations, regardless of how the money has been used. But even as he said it, I could see the conflict in his eyes. The money was gone, already converted into medical equipment that would genuinely help future patients. Reversing the transaction would mean taking away resources from the cancer center, potentially impacting patient care. It's okay, I said finally. The money should go to cancer research and treatment. That part they got right, even if their methods were criminal. Michael, Nancy said softly, you don't have to let them get away with this. What they did was wrong. What they did was steal from me while making themselves look like the generous family members who convinced the stubborn widower to finally honor his wife properly, I said. It's brilliant, actually. Cruel and illegal, but brilliant. I looked at the paperwork again, studying the forged signature and the careful wording that made it seem like a natural, loving gesture. They'd known I would never pursue charges, known I wouldn't be able to explain the situation without sounding selfish and petty. They'd found a way to take Lisa's insurance money away from me while making me look bad if I complained about it. But here's what they didn't count on. I continued, my voice getting stronger. They assumed I was keeping that money because I was greedy or couldn't let go of Lisa. They never considered that I was keeping it because I didn't know what she would have wanted me to do with it. I folded the paperwork and put it in my pocket. Well, now I know. Lisa would have wanted that money to help other cancer patients. She would have loved knowing that her death led to equipment that might catch someone else's cancer early enough to save them. Dr. Martinez was studying my face carefully. You're not going to report the forgery, are you? No, but I'm going to make sure they understand that their little scheme didn't work the way they planned. I pulled out my phone and called Robert's number. He answered on the second ring, probably expecting me to be calling to apologize for the scene at the hospital. Robert, it's Michael. I just wanted to thank you for the donation you made in my name to St. Mary's Cancer Center. Silence on the other end. I'm not sure how you managed to access my account or forge my signature, but I have to admit it was a clever solution. You got rid of Lisa's insurance money, made yourselves look generous, and put me in a position where I can't complain without looking terrible. Michael, I don't know what you're talking about. Robert's voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. Of course you don't. Just like you don't know how my signature ended up on donation paperwork that I never signed, authorizing the transfer of exactly the amount Lisa's insurance policy paid out. Another pause. The important thing, Robert said finally, is that the monies go to a good cause. Lisa would be proud. Yes, she would be. And that's the only reason I'm not having you arrested for fraud and forgery. I could hear Patricia's voice in the background, sharp and worried, though I couldn't make out the words. But, Robert, don't ever contact me again. Don't call, don't visit, don't send cards or letters or any other communication. If you see me in public, pretend you don't know me. Because if you ever try to interfere in my life again, if you ever try to make decisions for me or manipulate me or steal from me, I will press charges. And I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you really are. I hung up before he could respond. Nancy and Dr. Martinez had been listening to my side of the conversation, both looking stunned by the casual way I'd handled what amounted to a $250,000 theft. How are you so calm about this? Nancy asked. I thought about it for a moment, because they actually did the right thing with the money, even if they did it for the wrong reasons. And because Patricia was right about one thing. I won't be missed by them, and I'm finally okay with that. I looked around the hospital lobby one more time, taking in the place where I'd spent so many hours fighting for my life, where strangers had shown me more kindness than my own family. Dr. Martinez, I'd like to make one request about the Lisa Thompson Memorial Imaging Suite. Of course, what would you like? I'd like a small plaque that says, in memory of Lisa Thompson, who taught everyone who loved her that kindness matters more than blood. Can you do that? Dr. Martinez smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. I think we can arrange that. As I walked out of St. Mary's Hospital for the last time as a patient, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not just because the cancer was gone, but because the weight of trying to maintain relationships with people who didn't want me in their lives was finally lifted. The afternoon sun was warm on my face as I walked to my car, and for the first time since Lisa's death, the future felt like something I could look forward to instead of just endure. I had a house to return to, a life to rebuild, and the hard-won knowledge that family isn't always about blood relations. Sometimes it's about the nurse who remembers your name and asks about your day. Sometimes it's about the volunteer who sits with you during surgery because she believes no one should face their fears alone. Sometimes it's about the neighbor who brings casseroles without being asked, or the co-worker who helps you find care when you need it most. Lisa had taught me how to love completely, how to build a life with another person, how to find joy in ordinary moments. Her family had taught me something else entirely, that some relationships are meant to end, and that letting go could be its own form of love. As I drove home through the familiar streets of Portland, past the coffee shops and bookstores and tree-lined neighborhoods that made up the geography of the life Lisa and I had built together, I made a mental note to call Mrs. Chin when I got home. Maybe she'd like to come over for dinner sometime. Maybe it was time to start building the kind of family that chooses to stay.